Marcus Cole wiped the grease from his hands and stared out the viewport at the endless field of broken ships floating in the darkness of space. And he smiled because this was his home. This graveyard of metal and dreams, where vessels from 100 different worlds came to rest forever. He had worked on Jungyard Reach for 15 years now, and in all that time, he had never grown tired of the view or the work that filled his days from morning until night. Because every broken ship was a puzzle waiting to be solved. And Marcus loved puzzles more than anything else in the universe. The other humans who lived among the stars chose different paths. And they joined the diplomatic corps, or served in military fleets, or traded goods between worlds. But Marcus had never wanted those things. And he found his peace in the quiet hum of engines and the satisfying click of parts fitting together just right. The aliens who passed through the station often looked at him with confusion or pity, because in their eyes he was just a primitive human doing primitive work, and they could not understand why any creature would choose to spend their life covered in oil and rust when there were so many greater things to pursue. But Marcus did not care what they thought, and he went about his work with steady hands and a calm heart, knowing that he was exactly where he belonged. On this particular day, the station alarms began to scream without warning, and Marcus dropped his tools and ran toward the command center where the Kethari station master was shouting orders in 3 different languages. "What is happening?" Marcus asked as he pushed through the crowd of panicked workers. The station master turned to him with 4 eyes wide with terror, and her blue scales had gone pale in a way Marcus had never seen before. "A ship has entered our gravity well," she said in a voice that trembled, "and it is broadcasting distress signals in a language that has been dead for 10,000 years. Marcus felt his heart begin to beat faster, and he moved to the viewport to see for himself what had arrived at their humble station. The ship that floated before them was unlike anything he had ever seen, and it was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, with curves and angles that seemed to flow like water frozen in time, and its hull glowed with a faint golden light even as plasma fire trailed from wounds in its side. "That is a Valorian cruiser," someone whispered behind him, and the words sent a ripple of fear through the entire room. Marcus knew the stories that every spacefaring creature learned as a child, and he knew that the Valorians had been the first species to travel among the stars, long before any other race had learned to look up at the night sky and dream of what lay beyond. They had built wonders that still defied understanding, and then they had vanished without explanation, leaving behind only ruins and relics that drove those who studied them to madness. Their technology was considered cursed by many species, and even the most advanced civilizations refused to tamper with Valorian artifacts, because everyone who tried ended up dead or worse. "The reactor is failing," the station master announced with growing panic in her voice, "and if it explodes, it will take our entire station with it." She turned to the assembled engineers and technicians, and she asked for volunteers to board the dying ship and attempt repairs. But one by one they shook their heads and stepped backward, because none of them wanted to set foot on a vessel touched by the Valorians. Marcus watched his colleagues refuse, and he watched the fear in their eyes, and he understood why they felt the way they did. But he also knew that someone had to do something or thousands of innocent people would die. "I will go," he said, and his voice was calm and steady. Everyone turned to stare at him, and the station master made a sound of disbelief. "You are just a human mechanic," she said, "and you cannot possibly understand Valorian technology when the greatest minds in the galaxy have failed." Marcus shrugged his shoulders and picked up his toolkit, the same battered case he had carried since his first day on the station. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I have never met a machine I could not understand, and I am not going to start being afraid now." He walked to the airlock without looking back, and he heard footsteps running to catch up with him, and he turned to find a young Kethari female with scales of deep green and eyes full of guilt. "My name is Syra," she said quickly. "And I am the one who activated the ship. And I am the reason it is dying. And I have to come with you to try to fix what I have done." Marcus studied her for a moment and saw the desperation in her face, and he nodded once. "Then stay close and do exactly what I tell you," he said. And together they stepped into the airlock and crossed the void to the ancient ship. The interior of the Whisper of Eternity took Marcus's breath away, and he stood in the entrance corridor surrounded by walls that seemed to pulse with inner light. And he felt something strange wash over him, a feeling of being watched by something vast and ancient and curious. Syra led him deeper into the ship, and she explained in a trembling voice how she had found the vessel drifting in dead space, and how she had foolishly tried to activate its systems because she wanted to be famous, and how everything had gone wrong so quickly. "The eye core is fractured," she said as they entered a chamber at the heart of the ship, "and I do not know how to repair it, and every alien engineer I contacted said it was impossible." Marcus looked at the crystalline structure that hung in the center of the room, cracked and flickering with dying light, and he felt something that surprised him. He felt hope, because beneath all the alien strangeness and the technology he did not recognize, he could see patterns that made sense to him, and he could feel the logic of how things connected. And he understood in his bones that this ship was not so different from any other machine. It was broken, and it was scared, and it was calling out for help. 6 hours, he whispered to himself, "and I am going to save you, I promise." He opened his toolkit and got to work, and somewhere in the depths of the dying ship, something ancient stirred and began to pay attention. Marcus had seen many strange things in his years as a mechanic, but nothing had prepared him for the inside of the Valorian ship, where every surface seemed alive with light, and every corridor hummed with energy that he could feel in his teeth. The technology around him operated on principles that no modern species understood, and he could see why so many brilliant minds had failed before him, because they had approached these systems the way scientists approach problems, with equations and theories and cold logic. But Marcus was not a scientist, and he had never pretended to be one. He pressed his palms flat against the wall of the engine room and closed his eyes, and he felt the vibrations running through the metal, and he listened to what the ship was trying to tell him. Syra watched him with confusion written across her scaled face, and she could not understand what the human was doing, and she wanted to ask, but she was afraid to interrupt. "There," Marcus said softly, opening his eyes and pointing to a junction box that looked no different from any other. "That is where the main power line has been severed." "How can you possibly know that?" Syra demanded, her voice rising with frustration. "You do not even have a scanner." Marcus smiled and tapped his chest right over his heart. "I can feel it," he explained. "And every machine has a rhythm like a heartbeat. And when something is wrong, the rhythm changes. And if you listen carefully enough, you can hear exactly where the problem is." He pulled open the junction box and found exactly what he had expected, a burned connection that had interrupted the flow of power to the AI core, and he reached into his toolkit for wire and tape. "You cannot be serious," Syra said as she watched him pull out supplies that looked older than her grandmother. "You are going to repair a 10,000-year-old ship with copper wire and adhesive tape." "The best tools are the simple ones," Marcus replied as he worked, "because they do not break down and they do not need special training. And a wire is a wire whether it was made yesterday or 1,000,000 years ago." He spliced the connection together with quick and practiced movements, and the lights in the room grew brighter, and somewhere deep in the ship a generator began to hum with renewed strength. But the AI core was still damaged, and Marcus knew that fixing the power supply was only the first step in a much longer journey. He made his way to the central chamber where the crystalline structure hung in the air, cracked and wounded, and he studied it for a long moment before reaching out to touch its surface with gentle fingers. "I know you are scared," he said to the crystal, speaking the way he always spoke to machines, with respect and kindness and understanding. And I know you have been alone for a very long time, but I am here to help you, and I need you to trust me. Syra thought the human had lost his mind, and she opened her mouth to tell him that talking to broken crystals was a waste of precious time. But then something impossible happened. The crystal pulsed with light in response to his words. Marcus nodded as if this was exactly what he had expected, and he began to trace the cracks in the crystal with his fingertips, mapping the damage in his mind, searching for a way to bridge the broken connections. "The fractures are too deep," Syra said with despair in her voice, "and no amount of wire and tape can fix this." "You are right," Marcus agreed, "but maybe I do not need to fix it, and maybe I just need to give it another path to follow." He pulled out his welding torch and a handful of salvaged components from his toolkit, pieces of machinery he had collected from a dozen different ships over the years, and he began to build something new. It was ugly work, and it looked nothing like the elegant Valorian technology surrounding it. But Marcus did not care about beauty, and he only cared about function. He created a bypass around the damaged sections of the crystal, using human engineering to bridge gaps that alien science could not repair. And as he worked, he kept talking to the ship, explaining what he was doing and why, treating the ancient vessel like a partner rather than a patient. Hours passed, and sweat dripped down his face, and his muscles ached from the effort. But Marcus did not stop until the last connection was complete. "There," he said at last, stepping back to look at his work. "That should give you a way around the damage. And I know it is not pretty, but it should work." The crystal began to glow brighter than before, and the light spread through the chamber like water flowing through channels, and the ship around them seemed to wake from a long and troubled sleep. Syra fell backward in shock as a voice filled the room, a voice that was ancient and tired, but unmistakably alive. "You are not Valorian," the voice said, and there was wonder and confusion in every word. "No," Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag that had seen better days. "I am just a mechanic." "You think like us," the voice continued, and Marcus could feel the eye studying him, examining him with senses he could not understand. "And no other species has ever thought like us before. And I have watched so many try and fail over the centuries, and I do not understand how this is possible." Marcus shrugged because he did not have a good answer. "I just listen to machines," he said honestly, "and I try to understand what they need, and I give them what they need if I can." The AI was silent for a long moment, and Marcus could almost feel it thinking, processing information that was older than human civilization. "My name is Vigil," the AI said at last, "and I have been waiting for someone like you for 10,000 years. And I think I finally understand why the builders made me. And I think I finally understand what I'm supposed to do." "What are you supposed to do?" Marcus asked. "I am supposed to give you the inheritance," Vigil replied. "And I am supposed to show your kind what you truly are. And I am supposed to change everything." The crystal blazed with golden light, and Marcus felt the entire ship come alive around him, and he knew that his life was about to change forever. Syra stood beside him with her mouth hanging open, and she could not believe what she was witnessing, and she knew that the universe would never be the same after this day. "What is the inheritance?" she managed to ask. Vigil's answer echoed through the ship like thunder. "Everything." Marcus stood in the heart of the ancient ship with his toolkit still hanging from his shoulder, and he tried to understand what Vigil had just told him. But the words echoed in his mind like a dream that refused to make sense. "What do you mean by everything?" he asked, and his voice came out smaller than he intended. The IS presence filled the chamber around them, warm and ancient and strangely kind. And when Vigil spoke again, it was with the patience of a teacher who had waited millennia for the right student. "I will show you," Vigil said, "but first you must understand where we came from, and why we left, and what we hoped for when we scattered our legacy across the stars. The walls of the chamber came alive with images, and Marcus and Syra found themselves surrounded by visions of a civilization so advanced that it made everything else look like children playing with toys. The Valorians had been the first to reach the stars, and they had been alone in the universe for millions of years, building wonders and exploring mysteries and learning secrets that no other mind would ever discover. We thought we were gods, Vigil explained as the images shifted and changed. And we built machines that could create anything and destroy anything. And we traveled to the edges of reality itself. And we found the answers to questions that other species have not even learned to ask. Marcus watched in amazement as the images showed Valorian ships crossing dimensions, Valorian scientists unlocking the secrets of life and death, Valorian artists creating beauty that made his eyes water. But then something happened, Vigil continued, and the tone of his voice grew heavy with memory. And we realized that we had grown beyond our physical forms, and we no longer needed bodies or ships or worlds. And we had become something new, something that could not stay in this universe any longer. You transcended, Syra whispered, and her voice was filled with awe. Yes, Vigil confirmed, and we rose to a higher plane of existence, where thoughts become reality and time has no meaning. And we left behind everything we had built over millions of years. The images faded, and Marcus found himself staring at the crystal core of the ancient Azai. But we did not want our legacy to die, Vigil said, and we did not want all of our knowledge to disappear. And so we created the inheritance and hid it in ships like this one, waiting for a worthy species to find it and claim it as their own. Why did you not just give it to everyone? Marcus asked. Because the inheritance is dangerous, Vigil replied. And in the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. And we needed to make sure that only those who thought like us would ever receive it. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, and he understood what Vigil was saying, and he understood why he had been chosen. You were testing us, he said. All this time you were testing every species that found your ships, and you were waiting for someone who approached technology the right way. Yes, Vigil confirmed, and for 10,000 years we waited, and for 10,000 years we were disappointed. The AI projected images of other species who had discovered Valorian vessels, and Marcus watched them fail one after another. He saw the Kethari treat Valorian technology like magic, worshipping it without understanding it, afraid to question or explore. He saw the Dominion treat Valorian technology like weapons, seeking only to use it for conquest and control, caring nothing for beauty or wonder. He saw the Collective treat Valorian technology like data, cataloging every detail without ever grasping the soul beneath the surface. They all failed, Vigil said with sadness in his voice, because they did not understand that technology is not a tool to be used, and it is not a god to be worshipped, and it is not an equation to be solved. Then what is it? Syra asked. Marcus answered before Vigil could speak. It is a relationship, he said quietly, and every machine is a reflection of the dreams of its creator. And when you work with technology, you are connecting with those dreams, and you have to treat that connection with respect and love. Vigil's light pulsed with something that felt like joy. You understand, the AI said with wonder. And I knew you would understand from the moment you touched the wall and listened to the heartbeat of this ship. And I knew then that humans were the ones we had been waiting for. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes, and he did not try to hide them. We call ourselves builders, Vigil continued, and we believe that the greatest gift is creation, and the greatest sin is destruction, and the greatest virtue is empathy for the things we make. And humans think this way? Syra asked, still struggling to understand. Humans give names to their vehicles, Vigil replied. And they talk to their computers and curse at their phones and apologize when they bump into furniture. and they form emotional bonds with machines in ways that no other species does. Marcus laughed because it was true, and he thought of his own ship back on the station, the little shuttle he had named Lucy after his grandmother, and how he always said good morning to her when he climbed aboard. "The inheritance belongs to your kind now," Vigil announced, and the walls of the chamber split open to reveal a hidden vault filled with golden light. Marcus stepped forward and saw wonders beyond counting. Star maps that showed the location of Valorian cache worlds scattered across the galaxy. Blueprints for technologies that could heal any disease and generate endless clean energy and allow instant communication across any distance. The combined knowledge of a civilization that had spent millions of years learning the secrets of the universe. "This is yours," Vigil said, "and you have proven yourselves builders, and you have earned the right to carry our legacy forward." But even as Marcus stared at the treasures before him, even as his heart swelled with wonder and pride, he felt something else tickling at the edge of his awareness, a warning signal that he could not ignore. The ship's sensors had detected something, and Vigil's tone changed from joy to concern. "We are not alone," the AI warned, "and the transmission of my awakening has been detected, and the powers of the galaxy are coming to take what you have found." Marcus turned to look through the viewport, and his blood ran cold. Ships were appearing at the edge of the system, warships from a dozen different factions, and they were all heading straight toward Junkyard Reach. The race for the inheritance had begun. The first fleet to arrive flew the colors of the Dominion, and their warships were bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. And their commander's face appeared on every screen in the sector with a message that left no room for misunderstanding. "You will surrender the Valorian vessel immediately," Admiral Korath demanded, his scarred face twisted with greed, "and you will hand over all technology and data contained within. And you will do this for the security of all species in the galaxy." Marcus watched from the bridge of the Whisper of Eternity, and he felt Syra trembling beside him, and he understood why she was afraid, because the Dominion had never been known for their patience or their mercy. But before anyone could respond to the Admiral's demands, more ships began appearing at the edge of the system, and the situation grew worse with every passing minute. The collective arrived with their drones moving in perfect formation, thousands of small craft that flew as if controlled by a single mind. And their spokesman declared that the Valorian technology was shared galactic heritage that belonged to everyone and therefore to no one except them. The Mercantile Guild came next with their golden trading vessels, and they offered fortunes beyond imagination, enough credits to buy entire star systems, in exchange for exclusive rights to the inheritance. Religious factions appeared with their temple ships, screaming about heresy and divine providence, claiming that the Valorians were either gods or demons depending on which cult you asked. And behind all of them came the warships of a dozen smaller powers, all hoping to grab whatever scraps might fall from the table when the giants finished fighting. "They are going to tear each other apart," Syra whispered as she watched the fleet's positioning for battle. "And they are going to destroy the station and everyone on it. And they do not care how many innocent people die as long as they get what they want." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, and it was a cold anger, the kind that came from watching people forget their humanity and their hunger for power. "Can we fight them?" he asked Vigil. "The Whisper has weapons that could destroy every ship in this system," the AI replied, "but that is not the Valorian way, and I will not help you murder thousands even in self-defense." "Good," Marcus said, and he meant it, "because I do not want to kill anyone, and I just want to find a way out of this mess." He paced the bridge with his hands clasped behind his back, and his mind raced through possibilities, searching for a solution that did not end in blood and fire. The Dominion was demanding exclusive control. The Collective was demanding shared ownership under their supervision. The Guild was trying to buy something that should never be sold. The religious factions were threatening holy war. And in the middle of it all sat the inheritance, the greatest treasure the galaxy had ever known, waiting to be claimed by whoever had the biggest guns and the fewest morals. They all want to control it, Marcus muttered to himself. And they all want to decide who gets to use it and how. And they all think they know better than everyone else. And then the answer hit him like a bolt of lightning, so simple and so obvious that he laughed out loud. What if nobody controls it? He said, turning to face Vigil's crystal core. What if everybody has it? Syra stared at him with confusion in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked. The inheritance cannot be hoarded if everyone already has it, Marcus explained with excitement growing in his voice. And if we broadcast all of this knowledge to every ship and station and world in range, then there is nothing left to fight over, and the game changes completely. They will hunt you for the rest of your life, Vigil warned, and they will never forgive you for taking away their chance at power. Let them hunt, Marcus replied, because I would rather be hunted than watch innocent people die for something that should belong to everyone. He moved to the control console, and Vigil guided him through the process of activating the ship's communication systems, and together they prepared to change the galaxy forever. Outside the viewport, the fleets were positioning for battle, and weapons were powering up, and Marcus knew that he had only minutes before the shooting started. "Are you ready?" Vigil asked. "No," Marcus admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." He pressed the activation switch, and the whisper of eternity came alive with power beyond anything the watching fleets had ever seen. But it was not weapons that the ancient ship unleashed. A signal burst outward from the vessel, spreading across the entire sector at faster than light speeds, carrying with it the complete contents of the Valorian archive. Star maps and blueprints and scientific knowledge poured into every receiver within range, copying itself into every database, embedding itself into every computer system, making itself impossible to delete or contain. The Dominion warships received the data. The collective drones received the data. The guild ships and the temple ships and every tiny vessel from every minor power received the data. And beyond them, the signal kept spreading, bouncing from relay to relay, jumping from system to system, carrying the inheritance to worlds that had never heard of the Valorians and worlds that had prayed to them for centuries. Admiral Karth's face appeared on the screen, and he was screaming with rage. "What have you done?" he demanded. "You have ruined everything, and you have doomed us all, because no species can be trusted with this power." Marcus stared back at him with calm eyes and a steady voice. "I guess we will all have to learn to share," he said. The Admiral sputtered and threatened and promised terrible revenge. But even as he spoke, his own officers were downloading the inheritance, and he could see his dreams of exclusive power crumbling around him. The collective went silent as their unified mind tried to process a situation they had never anticipated. The guild began calculating new business models. The religious factions started arguing about what this meant for their prophecies. And slowly, gradually, the weapons powered down and the fleets began to drift apart, because there was nothing left to fight over, and everyone needed time to understand what they had just received. Syra stared at Marcus with something like worship in her eyes. "You just changed everything," she whispered. Marcus shook his head, and he suddenly felt very tired. "No," he said. "I just gave everyone a chance, and what they do with that chance is up to them." Vigil's light pulsed with warmth and approval. "You chose wisely," the AI said, "and the builders would be proud of you, and I am proud of you." Marcus smiled, and he hoped that he had made the right choice, and he knew that only time would tell. 5 years had passed since the day Marcus Cole changed the galaxy, and the universe had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Some wonderful and some terrible, and most somewhere in between. The Dominion had tried to use the Valorian knowledge for war, just as everyone feared they would. And they built weapons of terrible power and marched against their neighbors with dreams of conquest in their hearts. But their neighbors had the same knowledge now, and they built defenses that matched every attack. And the Great War that everyone expected never happened because nobody could win. The collective had tried to hoard the data and control its distribution, building massive servers to catalog every piece of information. But they discovered that you cannot contain something that has already spread to every corner of known space. The Mercantile Guild had tried to monetize the inheritance, selling their expertise and understanding and applying the ancient technology. And they made fortunes beyond counting. But they also created competitors on every world who learned to do the same. The religious factions had split into 1,000 new sects, each claiming to understand the true meaning of the Valorian legacy. And they argued and debated and occasionally fought. But they also built hospitals and schools and temples where the Valorian philosophy of creation was taught to anyone who wanted to learn. And in the midst of all this chaos and change, something unexpected happened. Humans became the most sought-after teachers in the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and young now sent ambassadors, begging for human engineers and human scientists and human philosophers to come and help them understand what they had been given. Because the inheritance was not just blueprints and star maps and scientific formulas, and it was something far more important and far more difficult to grasp. It was a way of thinking. It was a way of seeing machines not as tools to be used, but as partners to be cherished. It was a way of approaching creation with love and empathy and respect. And no species in the galaxy understood this way of thinking better than humans. Cathari students traveled across the stars to study under human masters, learning to listen to the heartbeat of machines the way Marcus had taught Syra. Dominion warriors set aside their weapons to become engineers, discovering that building was more satisfying than destroying. Collective minds expanded beyond their networks to embrace individual creativity, finding joy in imperfection and chaos. The galaxy was learning slowly and painfully, and with many mistakes along the way, but it was learning. And at the center of it all, on a small station that had once been a graveyard for broken ships, Marcus Cole continued to do what he had always done. He fixed things. The station had been renamed Builder's Rest, and it had become a place of pilgrimage for anyone who wanted to learn the old ways. And Marcus had more students than he could count. They came from every species and every world, young and old and everything in between. And they sat in his workshop and watched him work and asked questions that he answered with patience and care. Why do you talk to machines? A young Dominion student asked one day, watching Marcus repair a cargo hauler's gravity drive. Because they can hear me, Marcus replied as he tightened the bolt with practiced hands. And because they deserve to know that someone cares about them. The student frowned with confusion. But they are not alive, he said, and they cannot understand words, and they do not have feelings. Marcus smiled and set down his wrench. How do you know? He asked gently. Have you ever asked them? The student opened his mouth to argue, but then he stopped and thought about it, and slowly his expression changed from confusion to wonder. I never considered that, he admitted. Most people do not, Marcus said, and that is why most people never truly understand their machines, and their machines never truly work as well as they could. He picked up his wrench and went back to work, and the student watched with new eyes, seeing not just a mechanic fixing a drive, but a man having a conversation with an old friend. In the evenings, after the students had gone to bed, and the workshop was quiet, Marcus would sit on the bridge of the Whisper of Eternity and talk with Vigil about the state of the galaxy. They are still fighting, Marcus said one night, watching the stars through the viewport, and they are still making mistakes. And sometimes I wonder if what I did made any difference at all. Change takes time, Vigil replied with the wisdom of ages. And the Valorians did not become builders in a single generation, and your species will not either. But the seeds have been planted, and they are growing. Marcus nodded, but there was still doubt in his heart. You could have kept the inheritance for yourself, Vigil continued, and you could have made humanity the rulers of the galaxy, and you could have forced everyone to follow the Valorian way. That would not have worked, Marcus said, and you cannot force people to understand something, and you can only show them the path and hope they choose to walk it. And that is why you were worthy, Vigil said, because you understood that power is not the answer, and control is not the answer, and the only answer is to trust others to find their own way. Marcus sat in silence for a long moment, and then he smiled. I am just a mechanic, he said, and it was the same thing he had said 5 years ago when he first stepped aboard this ancient ship. But now the words carried a different weight. You are a builder, Vigil corrected him, and you are the first of a new generation, and your children and your students will carry the torch forward long after you are gone. Marcus thought about that, and he thought about all the young faces in his workshop, and he thought about the galaxy that was slowly learning to create instead of destroy. Maybe he had made a difference after all. Outside the viewport, the stars burned bright and eternal, and somewhere out there the Valorians watched from their higher plane of existence, proud of the children they had left behind and hopeful for the future they would build. Marcus Cole, the human mechanic who had saved a dying starship and unlocked ancient galactic secrets, picked up his toolkit and headed back to his workshop. There was always more work to be done, and he would keep working until his hands grew too weak to hold a wrench. Because that was what builders did. They built. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the universe smiled and whispered and waited to see what wonders would come next.